Hello and welcome to the VandySports podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee, joined by Billy Derrick and Luke Wyatt, our podcast part of the 440 Sports Network. Our show today presented by the Wash House. If you are dreading laundry day and if it is stealing the time from things you enjoy, let the laundry professionals at the Wash House take care of that for you with two convenient locations in the Nashville area. Just drop off your dirty laundry and their professional attendants will give you back the one thing you can never have enough of, and that is your time. Within 24 hours, you can pick up your nicely folded, fresh and clean laundry ready to be put away. Check out washhouseclean.com. Stop in today, get your time back. Stephen Andrews runs that company. He's been a dear friend of mine for about 20 years. Fantastic person, big Vanderbilt fan. Support the people who support our show. All right, our show also brought to you by the folks at the Murfreesboro Pure Milk Company, a family-owned third-generation milk and ice cream distribution company located in Murfreesboro, a partnership that began 50 years ago with Purity Dairy to provide milk and ice cream to consumers in Middle Tennessee. They supply Southern Kentucky, Northern Alabama, Chattanooga, and North Georgia. They supply not just Purity, but Mayfield, Nestle, and Haagen-Dazs. Check them out at npmci.com for more information. Gentlemen, we talked about moose tracks. You know what? I think the best one, I don't know if we've talked about yet, homemade vanilla. Have you guys had the homemade vanilla ice cream?
I have
I'm
not.
a big, I think your taste buds change over time. And I was a big chocolate guy. I still am. But there's not a lot that beats a really great homemade vanilla ice cream. And man, they make one. Um, trying to shed a pound or two here, but I couldn't help it last night. I was hungry. I went straight to the fridge and grabbed the homemade vanilla Purity. It was just calling my name, and I couldn't stop it. I couldn't make that voice shut up. But you know what? It was worth it. I'll go to the gym today.
Well, now,
Work it
Chris,
off.
what you're doing to Oreo, you're going to make Oreo fat by
Well,
feeding
Oreo is already fat, but
it to
I
put a.
say fat. He's stocky. He's 25 pounds and he is sturdy. Have you ever seen a 25-pound Shih Tzu?
No, have not.
I'm not sure he's a Shih Tzu. I think we might have
He's a.
gotten sold a bill of goods there. I don't know what he is. Ball of energy.
My favorite video is still, I think you posted it Saturday morning of the Wake Forest game. Oreo is just running circles
Yeah.
around the den, ready for some football. That was hilarious.
It's like that every day around here. I'm not kidding you. But anyway, speaking of dogs, Vanderbilt will be one against Missouri this Saturday. About a 12.5-point underdog, maybe more than that by now. Guys, we got a lot to unpack today. Luke, I'll let you start. Where would you like to go first?
Well, first of all, the injury situation. First year we talked about that. That's going to be part of the reason whether we were successful or not. And it's gotten to the point where we're. I think hopefully we're getting a couple of those guys back this week, but we need everybody on board to try to turn this train back on the track. And boy, right now the quarterback situation, I don't think AJ's healthy physically or mentally, and I just feel like Ken Seals will be the starter Saturday. There's not a whole lot we're going to do until we've talked about the turnovers. Last year, this football team ended the season +1 in turnovers, and they had 15 for the entire year. They've already had 11, and we haven't played but 5 games. So that's a disaster waiting to happen, and it has happened. So until that changes, I've said it before, nothing's going to change.
You mentioned the injuries, Luke. Clark said Christian James, Savion Riley, DeRicky Wright, AJ Swann, and Trudell Berry are all questionable. Obviously, I think they'd like to get both Riley and Wright back, but if you can get at least one of those guys back, I think that'll help you. Although I thought House and Sewell played decent to step in there. That not playing much this year. Clark said he liked that. Jalen Mahoney and BJ Anderson are probable, so it looks like they're going to get Anderson back. Mahoney, of course, I didn't catch his injury. It might have been in practice or so that's how he got injured.
Oh, no. Wait, I'm sorry. Is there? I'd forgotten there's an injury
Clark,
on top of that.
Yeah, I didn't know. Clark said he's probable. I don't, and the targeting doesn't carry over. So I'll have to look into that. Maybe we'll get Joey on that tomorrow during Clark's availability. But yeah, AJ was not comfortable. He wasn't comfortable in the pocket. He wasn't healthy. He looked to be playing at about 60%. And the Mahoney ejection, I thought, was huge. For Vanderbilt, there's certain plays early in games that you want to try to avoid, a pick six early, an ejection like that early. Well, you had both of those. I mean, the things that couldn't happen happened. And, you already had Wright, Riley, and Anderson out. So to lose Mahoney like that, I thought was just a brutal start to the game. Although I thought the defense played pretty well. Kentucky had 21 points off turnovers. So, I mean, that cuts their point total in half.
Billy is frozen.
He is frozen.
All right. While Billy unfreezes, I'll take it from here. And that's quite a face he's making there if you're watching this live. Yeah, I mean, to his point, okay, they were down. Basically, I wouldn't call Savion Riley a starting defensive back, but I think he's in the top 11 in reps. And so that's basically 4 starting DBs if you count in that they had gone in Mahoney, Wright, B.J. Anderson, and Savion Riley. So there you go. I mean, Mahoney misses 57.5 minutes with the targeting ejection. Yeah, I mean, it was about as bad as this video looks right now. There we go. Billy's coming back. Hey, we missed you there, buddy.
Sorry about that, guys. You got me?
We're off to a roaring start here today. People listening on audio are going to have no idea what we're talking about. But yes, I was commenting about how basically Savion Riley plays just about starters reps. So they had, if you consider a secondary 5 DBs, because you're nickel a lot these days, that they had 4/5 of their starting secondary out.
Right.
And yet that wasn't their biggest issue. It continues to be turnovers. All right. The last 3 games, they have given 4 teams touchdowns on turnovers. So that's 28 points right there. They have set teams up another 3 times inside their 19. Another time on this side of on the Vanderbilt side of midfield, I think. And then I think the other one, I'd have to look it up. But I think, in fact, I think I've got it right here. I'll give you the exact lines of scrimmages if I can find this because I wrote it down. Okay. 4 TDs that came back directly. Wake Forest interception gave Wake the ball at the Vandy 10. Another interception gave the ball to Wake at the Vandy 41. UNLV, an interception that gave the ball to UNLV at the Vandy 28. An interception that gave the ball to UNLV at the Vandy 19. Excuse me, that was a fumble. And a fumble, this is the worst one in terms of field position, or the most advantageous to Vandy once you turn it over. UNLV got the ball at its 44 after a fumble, and then another interception at the Vandy 12. So that's 9 turnovers right there. 4 of them went for touchdowns, 4 on the other side of midfield, and 1 was pretty close. Now I think this team's got here's my stance on it, and Luke, your thing has been it's just turnovers, and I sort of agree with you on that, but at some point it falls back on coaching. If you can't put guys out there that take care of the ball, that's either on your decisions or your failure to develop alternatives. And I felt like when we listened to Clark Lee on Tuesday, some guys were being put on notice, I think was a good way to put it. Would you guys agree? I'll start with you, Luke.
I do, but now, and I hate to say this, but it's true. And you can figure it up real quick, Chris. What percentage of those turnovers are directly related to AJ Swann?
Well, Seals lost a fumble. That's one of them. I think the one that Ken fumbled away was returned for a touchdown, right?
Right.
Okay, so that one's on Ken Seals. 3 of the pick sixes were on AJ Swann. And the first one, Billy, you were sitting right next to me in the press box. And they do this play, and I think it just was typical of this little spell they're in where AJ drops back forever. He's got 2 guys in his face. He kind of spins around, and his outlet is this running back who's probably, as the crow flies, 50 yards away from him, 40, 50. It's a dump off pass. He's over on the far sideline. AJ's on the far hash and just flings it up. And the minute he threw it, he'd been looking at Alexander, looked at him all the way. And I'm watching Max Hairston, who's probably 10 yards behind him at that point. And we see it, and he saw it too. And that was one of the easier pick sixes you'll ever see. Nobody had a chance to catch that ball other than Max Hairston. And that's just kind of, that sums up everything else. It was your safety valve is suddenly a tough throw. Your quarterback's got two guys in his face, I think, and he's making a horrible throw that before you even let it go, you're going, oh no, don't do that.
Yeah, just take a sack or throw it away, right? You got two decisions there because you got to have possessions ending in punts, in a form of a kick, a punt, or a field goal attempt, or a PAT, right? Vanderbilt they've had too many possessions ending in touchdowns from the defense, from the opponent's defense, and you can't rebound from those right now with where this program is. Hairston had 2 pick sixes for 83 yards, more receiving yards than any Vanderbilt wide receiver. He was Vanderbilt's leading receiver, and he had 2 touchdowns. So that kind of that's a telling stat there. You look at his numbers, and Vanderbilt's receivers struggled with drops too. I mean, the lackadaisical play, I thought, really came out, and it's hard when you got that pick six. Obviously, you get down early, 14-0. But Clark said the offense looked totally different than the defense from my perspective. I thought the defense was playing with so much more swagger. They were confident, and that starts with leaders like Nate Clifton, Kane Patterson. I think the offense needs some leaders to step up, and specifically at quarterback. Obviously, that's where it starts. And it's hard to talk about this team right now because there's so much you want to try to get out there. You've got this stat, you've got this thing on the defense, but it's, I can't imagine what the coaching staff feels right now. There's a lot, and it's not just the turnovers, surprisingly. And I thought it was interesting how Clark said a lot of the turnover things could be worse, right? And that was even more glaring. That, this could be worse. So Vanderbilt, to be 2-3, some people might say, wow, this team is 2-3 through 5 games. I can't expect, didn't see that. But to even have 2 wins with how poorly they have played as a whole, offensively, at least within careless mistakes, I think has been something to look at.
We all remember the Temple game of Derrick Mason's first game. The last 3 games have been a combination that looks like the Temple game.
Yes.
Just don't, and
it's not ideal.
You and I kind of disagree on it, basically laid it all at the feet of turnovers. But I don't know how or I know how good this team is, because we don't know until we play a full football game. Then you'll know what you have. If you can go a game where, say, you only have 1 turnover for each team and you play a team toe-to-toe, and then you see what the score is. It's almost like what Billy and I were talking about before we got on air, what Aria Gerson, I'm sorry, I may pronounce her name wrong, what she posted. I'm sure everybody saw that. If you took the turnovers us and took the turnovers away from the opponent, Vanderbilt would be 4-1 right now.
Yeah, if you go back and look at the games, if the points off turnovers were removed for both teams, here would be the scores. Hawaii and Alabama A&M would be the same. Wake 26, Vandy 20. So, and then Vandy 25, Kentucky 24. Now, again, you can't. This isn't this isn't like a situation where you go, oh, Vanderbilt, definitely would have won, but they would have been in the game in the fourth quarter.
1-score game.
The last couple of games with, Kentucky and Wake, they were in it with UNLV. But turnovers and the mistakes with penalties, I think they cleaned them up a little bit. But, and I hate calling this guy out, but Gunnar Hansen had 2 unnecessary roughness penalties. Just costly, really boneheaded plays that,
can't do it.
Everything has been costly. There hasn't been anything where you go, oh, they're fine. They'll eke through and we won't look back at that mistake. We've been looking back at seemingly every mistake with this team. You could say that's how the ball has been bouncing. That's fundamental technical, like Clark said. But Clark said it starts with coaching, right? And Chris, you mentioned it. You got to send the right guys out there that are not going to make mistakes. And that's where they're at in this season, right?
Yeah.
Starts at the quarterback position, maybe there's some changes within the receiver room, who knows? But, something's got to give here because it hasn't changed since the Hawaii game.
I want to point out a couple things. First of all, I mean, I think you sound stupid saying I thought the defense did some things when you give up 45 points, but again, that wasn't, the defense was only on the field for 31 points and another one dropped right in his lap. Now, I will push back a little bit. We say it's just turnovers. Well, like if Vanderbilt had come out and had been +4 in turnovers and beat Kentucky, Clark Lee's going to get some credit for that, right? Like if you win a football game at Vanderbilt, you put the credit on the coaches to some degree. And so here's the way I see it. All right, I'll put it, for example, Billy, you work for me. If you go out and do a couple of really dumb things or make some careless mistakes or cuss out somebody on our message board or something, first time or two you do that, which might be tempting lately. First time or two you do that, that's on you. I hire you. I think this is what I'm getting, whatever. You go do that. Those mistakes are on you. Now, if I keep you around and you keep doing that, that's on me at that point. And I feel like at some point that's kind of where I am with turnovers. Now, again, I think it felt to me like some guys were put on notice in that one. Specific names weren't named, but we've talked about the quarterback position. There was, I don't remember how Clark Lee phrased it, but he talked about how the defense had played with passion and energy and talked about basically some guys on offense no-showed. So I think he's talking about more than one guy here. So in my mind, Clark Lee has started to do that, and we can argue maybe he should have done it early. I thought they should have made a change at quarterback earlier than they did on Saturday. But that's in the rearview mirror now. I think that's one thing that's going to be necessary to turn this around going forward. But here's some stuff, and I get their schedule hasn't been great, but defensively, they're allowing 5.7 yards per snap right now. Not great. Yeah. You'd probably you see a lot of teams in the league that have also played pretty easy schedules that are under 5. But, I mean, it could have been worse, and they're forcing turnovers 2.4% of the time. And, again, they played, I thought, a respectable game against Kentucky with basically 4 starting defensive backs out. I do feel like maybe they kind of got lost. But, Luke, it felt to me like they tapped into something at stretches against Kentucky with the way they called that defense and dialing up some pressures. And, sure, Kentucky gave them some gifts with drop passes, but, that sort of evens out over the years. I remember Hawaii made some circus catches against Vanderbilt with defenders right there. So I guess it kind of evens out. But, Luke, I felt like if you wanted to take a bright spot from this game, I thought that maybe they found some stuff defensively in bits and pieces.
Well, we have to bring extra guys. We're not getting there with 3 or 4 man rush. And that's the thing we were doing. When we brought pressure, we looked pretty good because we got Leary off track and off of his timing. There was a point in that football game, I don't know if y'all saw it, but when Devin Leary got popped, his helmet came off, and we had come back and made it 24-13, and they were punting to us. We had them on the ropes. Leary was kind of like, I'm not sure about this. He fell coming out center, tripped over his right guard. He was shook and rattled, and we didn't take advantage of it. And that's what good teams do. They'll take that and move forward. But, yeah, we have to bring pressure. Now, I'm not saying we have to all-out blitz every time, but we have to bring an extra man just about every time we think they're going to throw the football.
Yeah, and I don't know why they haven't done that more often earlier in the year. That's one of my criticisms of the coaching staff.
Well, I will say this, Chris. Now, let's go back to the beginning of the year. What did we all say was our biggest concern? Corners.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why they were hoping to get there with 4 guys because of the corners. And, I don't know.
I think we all thought they could be able to get there with 4 guys at times this year, but they just, they haven't been able to. And although I thought I was looking real close at the film, I thought Wataha, Clifton, and Agu occasionally, right? They had some penetration there. I thought Agu had a deflection, or maybe it was Wataha. Clifton was in there late in the game, and I know that was when Kentucky was struggling, and they sent some blitzes too. But I think those 3 guys there, Clifton, Wataha, and Agu, I think you can build off of a little bit of that. They're still not getting enough. And you saw when Vanderbilt sends guys, they've got some guys that are physical, right? Ray Davis, or not Ray Davis, CJ Taylor, right? CJ Taylor and Ray Davis collided on a block. I'm getting lost in the Davis vortex, but Ethan Barr also. I mean, Ethan Barr came and I mean, it looked like he might have hurt Leary there, upper body there. So I think they've got some guys they like to send. I just think they've got to do it more, and I think they know that, because Luke, you told me after the postgame show, you said, when they send pressures, they can be a good defense, but when they don't right now, they're not. So they've got to.
Well, Bill Parcells told me a long time ago when I was a young man, and I was all telling him how, gosh, I blitz every time. He said, Luke, I would rather have 7 pressures and 0 sacks than 3 sacks in a game and no pressures. And that's the truth. You don't have to sack them. Just be in there and be disruptive and get them off schedule. That's all you have to do.
All right, guys, they're kind of up against it right now. Vanderbilt is going to be a double-digit underdog. It's going to be an underdog in every single game left, and probably double digits. The only question might be Auburn. That's a home game on November the 4th, and Auburn cannot score against anybody right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be the one. I think Auburn will be favored. Whether it'll be double digits
that might be,
remains to be seen.
That might be a slugfest for all ages.
Oh man. Well, and here's the thing, guys. And this came up yesterday in the press conference. For some reason, the topic of playing Memphis came up, which prompted a look at the schedule for next year, and it is not pretty. So basically, they're up against 7 games the rest of the year, and then 12 next year. Let me give you their schedule next year, okay? Virginia Tech, for some reason, God only knows, they're playing that game at Nissan Stadium. They play Norfolk State. They play an SMU team that is on the rise. They play a Georgia State team that's maybe 4-1, and pretty good. Then they play at home Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and then on the road Auburn, LSU, Kentucky, Missouri. They're going to have 19 games ahead, and I'm going to guess they're going to be favored in one of them. That's going to be Norfolk State.
Yeah.
How do they? I mean, they were about to be. They were in danger. I don't want to be too pessimistic, man. The winnable portion of the schedule is gone, and everything to 2025 looks just horrible. Luke, how do they get out of this?
Well, first of all, I disagree. The winning portion of the schedule. We played 5 football games and we haven't played a full football game yet. Period. We don't know how we will play if we ever have a complete football game where we play clean. Okay, let's just talk about we. Forget who we're playing. If we ever play a clean game, then we can judge what this team is. And right now, what this team is a comedy of errors because of all the turnovers. So if we don't have that in us to play a clean game, then we are who we are, right? Okay, next year. Like, I agree with that. If that team were to win 4 games with that schedule, he ought to get Coach of the Year. It's crazy how I'll actually talk to Clark about this when I get a chance. He said something in the press conference yesterday I totally disagree with when he mentioned that he trusts Candace to make the schedule. No. This is your job and your livelihood they're messing with. You pick who you play. And you can do it. James Franklin did it. There's been other coaches that have changed it over the years. We got out of playing Ohio State when Franklin was here. You have to take command of that. I know he's got a lot of fingers to have to put in dikes. I know he's trying to figure out his team first. I get that. But in the meantime, try to figure out a way to get at least 2 automatic wins in your schedule. And playing at Virginia Tech in 2 years and playing SMU and Georgia State at Turner Field, that's not how you schedule.
What are they doing? What were they doing there? How has this not been? I mean, when James Franklin came in, he's like, hey, burn this all down. Let's get winnable games in our building. Why has that not happened?
Well, once again, and I've told people this, Bobby Johnson couldn't do it. They wouldn't allow him to do it because when you change schedules, you have to buy out to get out of the game. That's what Frank got David Williams to do. We spent probably $1 million on buyouts, just buying out and changing the schedule. So Clark has to say, look, take $1 million and we're buying out of the Virginia Tech stuff, or we're buying out of the SMU thing. We're not doing this. And we're also not playing Georgia State on the road. No other SEC team's going to go to Georgia State. No other SEC team's going to go to UNLV. You know, that's the stuff we got to quit doing. We got to have 7 home games, which I think you said in 25 we do have. Or 26.
Yeah, let's see. They've got, next year they got 4 home SEC games. They got SMU and Norfolk State at home, and then Virginia Tech is not on their campus, but it's in their town. What are they doing playing at Nissan Stadium? I mean, yeah.
I mean, it's not that we have a huge home field advantage. In fact, it's at best a neutral.
What was there? Were there even 10,000 Vandy fans in the stands Saturday?
I think that's probably what it was. What was the total? I didn't hear.
I don't know, but I was staring at a lot of empty seats from the press box in a sea of blue. If
there was 25,000 there, it's probably, I don't know, 17-8.
Yeah, that's the thing that they're also battling that, right? Not only are they battling, you know, we talk about Coach Mason's players, yada yada yada, but you know the fan base hasn't really changed much. I think there was excitement heading into this season, but I think the UNLV loss mentally for a lot of fans was tough. You know, it kind of gave them a reason to, check out, for the season, at least for them in the meantime. But I think an SEC win all of a sudden breathes some life, into the fan base again, right? As much as a loss can deflate, I think an SEC win can sort of rise up a little bit. Right now, they need 4. They need 4 to go bowling. But Luke, I think if they're able to salvage and maybe beat some good SEC teams, I think that would say something. Maybe they don't get to a bowl, but maybe they don't go 2-10, because I think 2-10 would be pretty destructive.
Oh, I agree with that. Let me bring up one thing, Chris. You said on the last podcast that it had been 9 years since Vanderbilt had a bowl team or a winning season.
Winning record, yeah.
Basketball hadn't done it, whatever. You realize, I know you've been doing it 20 years. When we went to a bowl, you know how long it had been in 2008 when Coach Johnson went to the bowl? It had been 53 years.
No, they went to 182. Since
we won a bowl.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Oh, since you won, yeah.
53 years, yeah.
So 9 years. I showed you guys this beginning. As a fan, unfortunately, this is where Vanderbilt football is. All right, 100 years, we've been to 9 bowl games. That's once about every 10 years. And you can say, well, James Franklin took us to 3 in 3 years. You think that's going to ever happen again, to where they open the pocketbooks and say, here's millions and millions of dollars that the previous staff or no staff ever at Vanderbilt's ever had? If they do that, yeah, you can bring in whoever you want and we get it done. But until they do that, it's going to take longer to rebuild. I thought this team, and I'll say right now, I thought this team was going to a bowl because I thought the progression was there, and unless we had a ton of injuries, they go to a bowl. I still don't know what this team is, except for a turnover machine. That's the only thing I've seen. So until we figure it out and have one complete football game, we are who we are.
And Luke, I think that's what shocked me. I feel like there were some issues, and all the things that we thought would be issues for them have been issues, right? But I thought winning those two at the last of the season last year pointed to culture. You could see some holes, and what has happened is that every single hole we thought would be an issue has been an issue, and then a couple more popped up that we didn't see being issues. Then you got the turnover thing, and it's just a mess. I don't. Here's the problem, Luke. I still see a lot of same old Vandy stuff. It's kind of like, and like I don't mean to put this off like it's not a big deal, but yeah, I mean, when they're spending $1 billion or whatever it's going to be for facilities, that's a big freaking deal. But I just still see so many elements of same old Vandy with the scheduling, with the 8,000 fans in the stands, with the game has changed with NIL and the portal. They're slow to react. I got on pretty decent information, and the coaches don't come to me and complain about stuff. I get stuff secondhand through other places a lot of times. Somebody told me there's a couple of kids that are starting, and I didn't ask who, but apparently there's a couple kids that I was told were starting Saturday for top 25 teams elsewhere that wanted to come to Vandy, were in the portal. They couldn't get them into school. So it's almost like, it feels to me like they put all their eggs in this facilities basket right at the time where everything's starting to change. And then all these other things are happening. You got all these other things out there that need to be addressed. And they're sitting over there going, hey guys, but look, facilities. And I'm just going, hey, that's great. That's needed. But all these other things that you need, getting an excited fan base in your stadium. And part of that's on them. If people don't want to come to the games, that's on the players and the coaches. But you could have at least done something with ticketing to be a little more aggressive to get guys in your stadium, the portal, NIL. I just don't think whatever their budget for NIL is, I'm confident it is 14th and probably a distant 14th in this league. You talked about plugging holes, Luke, and trying to plug the dike. They're sitting here going, hey, we just plugged this gaping hole over here. And I'm looking at it going, yeah, you got 18 others over here that you're not addressing. And I just don't see how this changes until you have a massive culture shift in other ways. And that's my fear.
Yeah, no, it's legitimate fear. But we can push rewind and go back 20 years and we'd have the same conversation.
Yeah, this is the point at podcast season where you just kind of run out of things to say. I recognize it because I've been here about 9 years in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know what else to do at this point or what else to say.
Well, I'll reiterate what I said. I still don't know what this team is. They're 2-3. That's what you put on film is obviously. But dadgummit, if we can't go one football game, well, let's just say one turnover and the opponents have one turnover and we don't have stupid penalties, can we be in a football game in the fourth quarter with a chance to win? I believe we still can.
Yeah.
And in football is such a heavy momentum sport. I mean, you saw in the middle of that Kentucky game, it felt like, Chris, I mean, something was, was changing, it felt like, but it was for like 5 minutes. And then, it couldn't sustain any of that momentum. And when you don't get a touchdown, right, you could have easily made it 24-17, I think it was. But instead they made it 24-13. And you're like, you can't win with field goals here. I mean, you're not going to get back in this game with field goals. Now that with the turnovers, that didn't even really matter. But I think if they can find some momentum offensively, you're right, Luke, we don't know what this team can be, right? I mean, say they play a clean game against Missouri, no turnovers, no fumbles, no, costly penalties like the unnecessary roughness fouls. I want to say they could go out and beat Missouri,
Really
but
good.
again, we don't know that. So that's just where we're at. Week 5? We still don't know. So that's the biggest issue. When you don't know the identity of the team you're covering, or in Clark's shoes, I doubt they have a good feel of who they are. And when you don't know that in week 5, that's an issue. Not saying they can't find it, because you got Mizzou at home, at Florida, and then Georgia, and then a bye, and then at Ole Miss, Auburn, at South Carolina. So it's buckle your chin straps and go time, because there's no turning back. As James Franklin said, the boats are burning, right? I think they're, the boats are here, right? What was that?
I said that was scripted by him. He
Yeah.
Friday.
That's awesome. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I think Vanderbilt needs a little bit of that right now.
Well,
somebody to just step up and say, guys, look, the boats are burning. I mean, do y'all want to go 2-10? Do y'all want to, keep this this losing stretch going and lose the last, 8 games of our season? Or do you want to step up and do something about it? I think they're past that. I mean, you could have seen that against Hawaii or A&M, I mean, you're right, Chris. It's hard to talk about this team right now, but I just think they need somebody like that, and preferably on offense, to say, hey, guys, let's wake up. We're going to start moving the football, and let's try to see what we can do if we play a clean game.
We do have an identity. It's the guy in the red suit and the long white beard.
Handing out Christmas gifts, yeah.
Yeah, that's what we are right now. Right now, that's what we are.
You're right. And that's not. I mean, that's.
Go ahead.
It's not a good identity to have.
I should have not put my mic on the mute because Oreo just howled for like a minute and a half straight, and I just think that would have probably summed it up better than I could at this point. So,
but
I can hear it through the noise canceling AirPods. So,
I thought the early starts too. Luke, we got a lot of mailbag questions, Chris, and I think we'll probably start to get to those. But Vandy's first 6 drives, 5 punts and 1 interception. Right. I mean, you got to start games better.
Yeah.
I mean, they just, and I feel like they've struggled with that under Clark, and I don't know what to attribute that to. But let's start there. I mean, if you can play a clean game, that's one thing. But you could play a clean game and still get down, 14-0 after a couple of bad defensive drives. The defense might settle in, but I think they've got to find a way to start the games better. And also the receivers, McGowan and Shepard were non-existent. I mean, Shepard had 10 targets and 2 catches. Right. I don't even know how many drops. He only had 31 yards. Let's see here. McGowan, 5 targets, no catches. I mean, you need more. So that means there's some drops in there. But the running backs, guys, I want to mention this. Just 6 total receiving targets to the 2 running backs, Smith and Alexander. 2 targets for Alexander and 4 targets for Smith. I just think they need more of that. They need more targets to the running backs right now. Because you don't have time, right? At least most times the offensive line has not been giving enough time. Now, at times they are, but not consistently. So I think you've got to have more targets for those running backs, because you haven't been able to run the ball either. So I know there's a lot, and we've got a lot of questions, but Luke, I wanted to throw that out there too. I think they need to throw it to the running backs a little bit more.
Agree with that.
Oh, we lost Luke.
Are you guys there?
Yeah, we
go.
No, one thing I want to mention, what I did like Saturday was 7 catches by tight ends. I don't know how many targets there were to the tight ends, but 7 catches to the tight end is a great thing, I think, because those guys, more than often you have a mismatch problem. You got a linebacker on ball or whoever it may be that's in the game, Cameron Johnson. I like that. They got to keep doing more of that.
Yeah, 9 targets for the 3 tight ends. So
7 catches. So that's
yeah, it's pretty good.
Billy, I remember at one point I looked at you and I guess the passing game has been so bad lately. I'm just used to it. But I remember looking at you going, holy cow, they're 9 of 27 throwing the ball today. And I think it became 10 of 30, and you can't win like that. I mean, in addition to the turnovers, you got to be able to sustain something. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm not an offensive expert. Sometimes it seems like they need to find easier throws. Yeah, you got a slot guy in Jaden McGowan that you feel like should be getting some targets on the hash somewhere. I don't know what there were so many problems with their passing game that we could spend a whole hour on that, but that was something we talked about in the press box as we watched it.
Yeah. Also, I want to give a shout out to Matt Hayball. Unbelievable performance. I mean, what would they do without Hayball this year? 7 punts, 352 yards. He had a 62. Again, he's got a 60 every game. He had 5 inside the 20, and he was on the Ray Guy like top 8 weekly nomination thing. So, guys, he might win the Ray Guy. Now, I don't know if he does, but because Kai Kroger is a really good punter as well for South Carolina. But if he keeps putting up these numbers, averaging 50, putting the 62 out there, I think Hayball could win that Ray Guy. That's where we've gotten, Chris. We're analyzing the punter.
Well, but you know what? You say that, and it's true. I mean, how many times did he flip the field Saturday to give us? That's the thing. Just like the interception that Swann threw into traffic, it was 24-13, I think, at the time. Don't just let Matt flip the field, and then you can hold him, and get the football back. A punt is not always a bad thing.
No, and I told you, Luke, during the post-game show, I said, Luke, this offense, and this feels sickening and weird to say, but this offense should be relieved. All right, we get to send Hayball out there. I know that's awful. You should not be thinking it. But right now, I mean, I think that's where you got to go right now with this offense, right? I mean, you got to send Hayball out there and, you just avoid a turnover. I mean, start there and then you can build off that because right now, you're almost turning it over just as many times as you are punting. I mean, Hayball punted. That's not true. Hayball punted 7 times, but I mean, let's be real here. We get to Hayball first without turning the ball over to where he can flip the field, and then you can start to think about other things offensively, playing cleaner football.
Yeah. Punts and field goals are okay.
Mm-hmm. Ready for the mailbag, Chris?
Sure.
All right. Mailbag is sponsored by Sutherland & Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt or in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call at 615-846-6200 to see what your rights are and if they can help. Sutherland & Belk been with us from the beginning, even though I've only been here for a few months. They've been with us for the beginning, the whole ride. So big thanks to them. Also, John Leffen and the Maynard Nexen Government Contracts Group brings us our guest line. That is Luke Wyatt. Maynard Nexen advises government contractors on all aspects of their businesses with a proud focus on matching legal solutions to business needs. Give them a call at 256-551-0171. All right, we got a lot here, and luckily I got this out early. Got this out when I got back home yesterday. So let's start with a good one. E. Stedel 3. Will number 8 Ken Seals play most of the game against Missouri? I'll start. I think my gut tells me, and I started this during the Kentucky game. I had a feeling in the back of my head, and a lot of this is, that feeling in the back of your head can be true because it's your gut instinct. My gut told me that Ken Seals is going to play. And I think he'll start. I think Swann was probably at 60% the whole Kentucky game, and he was probably down to about 20 or 30% after that last little nick on his elbow. I don't know if y'all saw that, but got a chance to rewatch that, and D. Lyman just kind of nicked the elbow a little bit, and Swann was down, and it just didn't look good. So I think health-wise, number one, he probably can't and shouldn't play, but performance-wise, I think, say he wasn't hurt, I think they might still consider a change. So yeah, I most of the game, yeah. Now if Seals gets hurt, you never know. Do you send out a 40% Swann, or do you put Dickey or Taylor out there? I mean, it gets really hairy if Seals gets hurt. But yes, I do think you'll see Seals on Saturday. I think both of y'all agree, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Ken will start. I don't know that for sure, but I think it'd be a good thing either way, because even if AJ's able to play, he needs to stand over there and watch for a game.
Yeah,
this is one thing I just do not get with coaches across the board. So this one is not aimed at Clark Lee or anybody in particular. This is a sports wide issue. Every team's got backups at every position other than maybe kicker. Like if you're an NFL team, you're probably not carrying a backup kicker. But other than that, everybody's got a backup. And when a guy's not playing well and you see signs of injury, and I think you saw that Billy, I pointed out to you, first quarter, Swann comes off the field, left arm's up, right arm's dragging behind him. You seen him favoring that elbow
several times, Chris. Almost every time he walked off, he was walking off gingerly.
I don't know what the number is for AJ Swann, if he's 5% healthy or he's 95% healthy, but I'm sure it's somewhere in there. It's not 100%. It's not 0%, but whatever the number is, the product, it's not working. And how you look at it and say, this guy at X percent is better than our backup at, I would presume, close to 100%, because he's not playing much in games and he's not, I would think, getting hit a lot in practice. So I never have understood that. You will see coaches in a lot of sports continue to roll guys out there at less than 100% when they're not playing well. Then everybody blames injuries later. I'm like, hey, how do we get here? It feels to me like when you reach that point where health is a concern and performance is clearly lagging, you're doing everybody, including the guy you're throwing out there, a disservice by continuing to roll them out there. So I think we're going to see a lot of conceals Saturday.
Let me ask you guys a quick question. If he was healthy, 100%, but his performance has been what it's been, when would you have benched AJ Swann?
Probably after UNLV. But then again,
I don't know.
That's what I would say. You very easily could have probably made that decision earlier. I think they also think they're in the position that Swann, it's like you can't live with him sometimes, but you also can't live without him. I thought the UNLV game was a perfect example of that. Now, Seals, when he went in, he had no clue probably he was going to have to go in. I know, Swann had gotten banged up there. But you saw Seals go in and immediately miss a wide open touchdown to McGowan. And you're like, okay, now that's one possession. And then Swann leads this team back into the game. So a little bit of it is can't live with him, can't live without him. But at the same time, when he has been that destructive, especially in the Kentucky game, I think the Kentucky game was sort of a stamp of, okay, whether he's hurt or not, a change probably has to be made. But yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Well, my answer would be sometime probably between halftime of the Wake Forest game, which just seemed to be a little aggressively early. And I thought at minimum, the latest you could have gone was halftime of the Kentucky game. I was a little surprised that Ken Seals or somebody else wasn't starting the second half. I thought at that point, I didn't know what else you needed to see. Maybe you could say halftime of the UNLV game and pick your midpoint there. But I think Ken came out of the third quarter for that UNLV game, lost a fumble that went the other way and looked a little disjointed and nervous. But look, what you're doing is you're also asking a guy that's barely played for 2 years, hey, kid, here's your moment. That's a lot of pressure on a kid in that moment. AJ Swann got a lot longer leash than he did. And Billy, you know this. And look, here's the other thing. I'm not in practice. Maybe Ken Seals is throwing 5 picks a day in practice. I highly doubt it. But you and I went to a lot of fall camp. I thought Ken was the most accurate quarterback they had in terms of staying away from interceptions. I thought that last year too. All I can go by is what I see in practice. And I'm not trying to bash AJ Swann here. Sometimes kids just go through slumps and need to sit and work it out. It happens with hitters in baseball. I just kind of feel like that between that and the health, that's where we are. And from what I've seen of Ken, I know people have written him off. I've seen enough in practice with consistency to feel like, hey, maybe there's an answer there. Maybe you got to get past the nerves and the pressure to get to it. But I don't know that it's out of the realm of possibility that we see solid play from Ken going forward. I've seen it in practice.
Yeah, with a full week of practice as him as the starter, right? I mean, I'm guessing that's what we're looking at here. But Seals started 16 games during the 2020 and 21 seasons, so he has played a good bit of football, just not super recently, right? I mean, last year he didn't play at all. He's had a strange career. And, for him to still be at Vandy, I think says something, number one, about him, his journey, but also number two, about this program and the type of kid that Clark attracts. And I think this could be a special end of the season. I potentially, right? Now they could go 2-10, not win another game, but I really do think Ken Seals could put his name into Vanderbilt lore if he goes out. Say he leads this team and they look a whole lot better. Now again, that's the positive, right? That's the top of this mountain. The bottom of it is Vanderbilt continues to struggle. They turn the ball over. I think there's some potential here, though. Obviously, we'll be tracking that. Clark will talk tomorrow, and we'll see if there's any final statement on Swann's status and whether Seals might go. But this will be interesting. And Luke, we talked about it with Seals. He's a veteran guy. I think right now they need a veteran leader offensively.
Yeah, this game kind of reminds me of when we played Missouri and Mo Hassan came in and that's the kind of thing you hope can happen Saturday. One other quick question. I know we got to go back to the mailbag. Who do you think's the backup? Is it Dickey? Is it Taylor?
I'll give you my opinion. I've thought that Drew Dickey has gotten overlooked. I know that everybody comes to practice and looks at Walter Taylor and says, man, look at that big left arm. And I get it. 2 years from now, we may be talking about Walter Taylor as the savior of Vanderbilt football, for all I know. But I saw a lot of mistakes. I thought Dickey was just a solid guy, guys. Doesn't make a lot of mistakes. Probably the best runner of the group. Between the skills with Taylor, all the stuff with Swann, the fact that Seals is started for a year and a half, I think that Drew Dickey gets overlooked. And I have always wondered, what would that look like if he got a little bit of game time?
Right. Yeah, and Dickey, he was that second guy during fall camp, or at least third guy, in the rotation. But it'll be interesting. I don't think the staff wants to get there with with that backup. All right, 5 games into the season. This is from Raiders 1967. What offensive and defensive players are the most positive surprises? Well, I'll approach this as more of pleasant surprise. So maybe a guy that we didn't really expect, to come out here and play as well as he has. I'll go offensively, London Humphreys. Early in the season, he really popped, especially against Wake Forest, UNLV as well. 12 catches, 299 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He's averaging 25 yards per catch, which is a pretty incredible number. And then defensively, I'll go Savion Riley. Riley has looked good, and I didn't really expect – Chris, we saw him in fall camp, and, he's a sophomore, and we thought he might play a little bit more, but he's played more than I expected and has played well. 18 tackles as a sophomore, and he didn't play last week. I think they're hoping to get him back against Missouri, but I would go Humphreys and then Riley. Luke, what say you?
I agree with London. I think that's a no-brainer. And on defense, I would a kid who's really stood out to me is Longwell.
That was going to be my second option. Yeah,
Billy, Chris? You took the 2 that I was going to name.
Yeah,
gotcha. Yeah, and they're young guys, right? I think that's that can be positive for this team. Let's see here. Poor Vandy fan 615. Which of our injured players do we realistically expect to get back and when? Well, I said it at the top. Christian James, I don't think he'll be back against Missouri. You could get Riley and or Wright back from Missouri. I think Ricky Wright will be back. Whether Riley's back or not, I don't know. Swann, my gut tells me he won't play. Trudell Berry apparently is questionable as well. Not sure about him. Again, Clark will be talking tomorrow. I don't know if y'all know anything else, but this is as small of an injury report as they've had all year. I mean, I think that could be a positive. Mahoney and Anderson are probable, so I think this defense starts to get to some guys healthy. You start to see it play a little bit better. But that's what I would say to that right now. Let's see here. All right, Colombiano Door. What would the SEC points per game differential and win-loss conference record have to be in order for each of you to move on from Clark? If there is a no scenario, even if we lose by 28 a game the rest of the way, please go on record as saying so. Well, first off, move on from Clark. I don't think that's happening anytime soon. So I know that was a big part of your question, but SEC points per game differential. I think you look at Kentucky. What was that, Chris? That final score, 45,
lost
28.
by 17. Yeah,
lost by 17. And I think, Luke, this another thing you mentioned to me after the post game. You said Vanderbilt is 0-5, 0-5 against the spread this year. That means they're losing by more than Vegas expected them to lose by. So that's something I don't think can and should continue, because if it does, like I said, number 1, 2-10 can be destructive. But if it's a bad, boring 2-10, I think that can be even more destructive. So if you're able to salvage, maybe finish with 3, 4, and/or 5, and God forbid 6, I just think that helps you a lot more. But points per game differential, I think that's a good question, because if you go back in the season and say Vanderbilt never covered, I think that's a little bit of an indictment just to say, well, I mean, you weren't in the game.
Well, when you talk about getting rid of coaches, all you have to do is historically look at where Vanderbilt is. Vanderbilt, Jack Green was here 4 years in the 60s, and Rod Dowhauer was here for 2 years. Everybody else has gotten at least 5 years. And I think at Vanderbilt, you need at least 5 years, unless you're doing something obviously wrong like Rod Dowhauer was. So anybody that thinks Clark's getting fired after this year, they're way off base.
I would answer, maybe this is sidestepping the question. I still see a lot of things in Clark that I think can work. There's a lot of questions about coordinating, play calling. Do they have the right assistants? I think those are fair questions at this point. I think Clark has probably got to spend some time in the offseason looking at the mirror, saying, am I enabling something in a culture? Because I think he's done a lot of the right stuff, but I think Clark also has got to get more aggressive and asking for stuff that he needs. NIL didn't make them turn the ball over 9 times and put the other team in very advantageous spots 8 times.
Right.
But there's also this, guys. Other than that UNLV game, even if the turnovers, you take a couple away, they still may not win either of those games, right? They still probably lose to Kentucky, and they might lose to Wake. So it tells me you've got progress to make beyond that, right?
Yeah.
And maybe Clark Lee year 3 at Vandy and Mark Stoops year 9 at Kentucky or whatever. Kentucky should be further along, easier to get kids in school and stuff like that. But I'm just saying, I named a half dozen things off the top of the show that I think still need to change around the culture of Vanderbilt football. Luke, I think you said it best. Clark's got to start taking responsibility for some of those things, like the schedule and putting them in position to win, whether it's making more aggressive asks or whatever. So I'm not ready to throw Clark Lee off onto the bonfire. If they lose the rest of the season, if you see them making some improvements, but I do think,
Oreo.
I think Oreo just said it, continuing to do the same thing.
Oreo's excited
Over and over, without, and expect things to be different. It's a little bit of insanity. So
Oreo wants the ice cream.
Oreo,
guys, this is every day. I mean, this is my life every day. You can hear
it. Last year, again, I go back to last year. A lot of people on the board were saying fire Clark Lee before we beat Kentucky and Florida, right?
Go ahead, Luke. I'm just laughing.
No, I was just saying last year some of these same people were on the board were saying fire Clark Lee last year, and then we beat Kentucky and Florida.
Exactly.
Against Tennessee. Now, obviously, we all know, but we expect because we're not close to that best Tennessee here.
Yeah.
Or
do we just?
I'm just letting that play for effect at this point. We could just do a whole podcast
of
and,
him
let him howl, and that might sum it up as well as we can. I mean, that's just kind of where we are.
I love it, Chris. Let me mention this. Going back to Mark Stoops' career at Kentucky, right? Started year 1, 2-10, year 2, 5-7, year 3, 5-7. He didn't get to a bowl at Kentucky until year 4. Mark Stoops did. So, and that's a similar spot. Kentucky Vandy football for a long time.
Billy, here's another thing that's right in front of us. What does Kentucky do every year? Kentucky plays 3
4
teams in
gimmies
September.
every year.
Yeah, well, 3 because they always play Louisville, and sometimes that game is tough,
Right.
and sometimes it's not. But I'm telling you that there are multiple things that are sitting right in front of us.
That's the strategy.
That should and have to be answered, and these would be obvious at any other athletic department in the country. And at Vanderbilt, you get but we're different, and this and that. This and that has gotten you decades of misery, and at some point it's got to change, guys. I mean, we can't sit here, and they have culpability, but you cannot expect them to thread this delicate needle where the eye of the thing has gotten smaller just in the past 2 or 3 years. And again, they got some culpability for some stuff, but until some of these things that are obvious start to get acted on, and they should have been acted on years ago, but they weren't. I think we're going to continue to have some of the same types of podcasts we've had for a while now.
Here's another good one from Colombiano Door. This is specifically for Luke. In what ways does Clark need to be better than the Bobby Johnson era and coach differently than he did?
I mean, I know what he's doing there. We had a little tit for tat on I got involved with something with a guy, Vandy Fitz or something, a comment he made about Bobby Johnson. And this is Colombiano Door came to his defense. So let me get this out straight. So I'm not going to dance around anything. That's who I am. I know what you're trying to say because you didn't like Bobby Johnson either. So Bobby Johnson, again, we've been to 9 bowl games. He broke the losing streak to Tennessee, who hadn't beaten them in 22 years. He did that. He took us to a bowl game. He won a bowl game, and he developed it the best way he could within where the athletic department was supporting him. We all want to dump on these coaches and say, he doesn't know what he's doing. Fire him. Fire that guy. Didn't know what he was doing. He kept his coordinators too long. When you have a budget for assistant coaches that was the same as MTSU's budget, you can't make changes. You say, well, go hire a great offensive coordinator. Go hire a great defensive coordinator. How are you going to do that when the athletic department doesn't give you enough money to buy pens and pencils? I mean, it was literally that type of thing for Bobby Johnson. And if you don't believe me, I don't know what else to tell you. I lived it. I was there. So first of all, the Colombiana Door, you can go ahead and be a hater and be a negative Nelly or whatever you want to call yourself. Clark Lee and Bobby Johnson are 2 different people. They're both good men. I know that much. But again, until the 5th year rolls around, Clark Lee's not going anywhere. I don't know if it answered his question, but I know what he's trying to get at.
Yeah. All right. MEH username. Love the podcast. Give us more. Well, that's what we're trying to do. Number 1, any chance we see AJ Newberry this season? His film looks elite. I think, we've talked about him. He hasn't played. I don't think. I've seen him in warm-ups and he's been practicing. He was, he looked good in the scrimmages in fall camp. I just think he's about a year away from probably contributing. He's got to get older. He's got to get, form some maturity. And I do think he's going to be a good player though. I mean, I think they think he's their he's their guy for the future, their home run guy that, that they can look at and kind of give the ball to when they need it. Number two, in the UK broadcast, the announcer suggested that Will Shepherd was taking plays off. What are your thoughts after seeing his play on Saturday? I've seen that at times. I mean, we know Will Shepherd. We know the type of player and personality he exudes on the field. I know we saw the unnecessary roughness or extracurricular after the Hawaii touchdown where he stepped over the player. And when Shepherd scores a touchdown, he'll usually let you know about it. But when he's not playing well, he'll usually let you know about it as well with his body language. And I've seen that with him the past few years. I think that's just kind of the player he is. Now, whether that hurts his NFL stock, I don't know. Is that something they watch? I'm sure it is. But what did y'all think? Did y'all see anything with that? I mean, the drops and everything, it just felt like it kept compounding for him.
Chris, you mentioned a while ago at the press conference yesterday, he mentioned about putting some guys on notice. In my opinion, Will's one of those guys.
That is exactly what I was about to say. And I don't have evidence of it, but I mean, there were guys on our board talking about it looked like he was loafing. Look, in the football game, your eyes are going a lot of different places. You can miss something that's obvious, but that got noticed at places. And again, you could go back and listen to that press conference pretty clearly. It was clear that he was talking to somebody or somebody's. And I don't think it was just his quarterback and his receiver. It might be, guys that are continuing to commit stupid personal fouls and stuff like that too. I think that was a broad brush that probably covered a lot of folks.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Godors 94. Is the offense performing similarly in the games compared to what you guys saw in fall camp? I'll say this, no. I mean, obviously it's Vanderbilt on Vanderbilt, right? So, they're going to look better. But, I mean, Chris, offensively, we saw deep shots. We saw that. Now, the running game, I will say, that looks pretty similar. The running game hasn't changed a whole lot. I don't think in fall camp they were able to get a ton of push. But the offensive line, I think pass protection looked better. Now, you're facing Vanderbilt. You're facing Vanderbilt's defensive linemen. And I think it might even be more of an indictment on that front seven that they did look that good. Swann, I mean, yeah, he had time. So he did look better in fall camp, so I just overall, no. Running game looks the same, but I mean, Chris, offensively, and Luke, I know you were there too. Pass protection looks totally different between fall camp and what we've seen here in the games.
Right. Well, what coaches do in camp, and I know this because of sitting staff meetings, but of course, in my day, we had 2-a-days. So they want to create a balance. They know what they got pretty much after a week or so of camp. You may not know, you just worry about depth after that. But what they want to do, they don't want one side of the ball to dominate during practices because that automatically you're going to lose confidence on one side of the ball. So they will create situations to make one practice where the offense looks good, one practice where the defense looks good. They try to keep a balance. That's just for the psyche of the football team. Then they know, hey, going into the season, we got to block it this way. We got to use a guy to chip or whatever because the line's just not that good. In this case, I don't know. I agree with you. I'm very disappointed in the pass blocking, picking up twists, being just kind of non-athletic.
There was one Hansen and Stinchcomb did a good job. He was an offensive lineman at Georgia, so he's really good with the offensive lineman. There was one Gunnar Hansen didn't even move. I mean, he didn't even get out of his stance. So it's been pretty glaring. Chris, I think you're same.
Yeah, I would say this. No, it didn't look like that in practice, but part of it was they protected better. And you see what happens when Vanderbilt tries to get a 3- and 4-man rush with its defensive front. Well, their offensive line could block that and fall. Now it's different. But the thing is that my concern with AJ Swann was the talent's always been there. I thought that he played better in games last year than he did in practice. The mistakes would show up in practice, and there seemed to be some kind of governor that when he got to games, he might not try as much of risky throws and things like that we saw sometimes in practice. Seemed like when he got to games, like, okay, I know not to do that. Unfortunately, that part of his game where you see it in practice, and we saw it again this fall, it started to translate to game day. You guys are seeing it. And so in that respect, yes, I just didn't think much of their running game, period. Even in fall camp, they didn't run the ball particularly well. You're seeing that show up now too. So unfortunately, it's one of the things that the things they did well, maybe we got other explanations now, and the things we were concerned about are showing up just because of ability and habit.
All right, last one. Knoxville Door asks, I just lost it. Accidentally X'd out of it. Okay, I remember his question. He asked, what would it take for Clark Lee to win back more of the fan base this season? Because he said it feels like people are jumping ship pretty fast. And I'll start. I think I said it earlier. I think for a lot of fans, it just takes one SEC win. You saw it last year. That Kentucky win, I think, worked wonders. Number one, it broke the streak, 26-game losing streak in the conference. You beat a ranked team on the road, right? I don't think anyone saw that coming last year in Lexington. No one. And then the next week, heading into that Florida game, it was like, oh, they can't do it again. They got a good Florida team coming in. All of a sudden, Florida, the wheels have fallen off, and Vanderbilt beats them. So I think they can do it again. I really do. Obviously, they've got to change some things. Maybe it doesn't happen this week. Maybe it happens Auburn at home. Maybe they pick off South Carolina. I really do think the SEC is that topsy-turvy that, we don't know much about the league. We still don't know much about this Vanderbilt team if they play clean for 4 quarters. So I just think get one, and I think you'll get a good chunk come back. If you win 2, you start to kind of put layers on top. But Luke, I think get one, start there. And, I think a lot of people that have jumped after UNLV might jump right back.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, what you just said a while ago just reminded me of something. The 26-game losing streak, people don't realize what a burden that is on a coach and a football team. You have no idea. I went through it twice, or that, and then we had one in the 70s from 1976 to 1981 where we didn't win a conference game. So that was 5 years of no conference. That was 6. You only played 6 conference games then. And I remember when we broke that in 81, that springboarded us to the 82 bowl team. That this is not going to springboard us to a bowl for next year, I don't think, because of the schedule. But if you could get a couple of these wins, I know we're probably not going to go to a bowl now, but if you get a couple more wins this year and you quit looking like a comedy of errors out there, that's the 2 things that's got to happen. People it's like anything else. They want to be entertained and they want a decent product. I don't have a problem with that. And it's going to take that until they come back.
Yeah, I think Luke basically nailed it there. I think you need a win, maybe a win or 2, and don't get beat by 50 by Tennessee and do something where you're more competitive and maybe it's a game after halftime. Don't look like roadkill. Where you're getting 80 yards and the other team's getting 600. I think something that people can believe in, that's their evidence of improvement, I think is what they need. Now, you go and lose out and you lose all of them by double digits. I think they're going to have problems.
You mentioned that Tennessee game in Knoxville, last game of the season, Chris. That would turn the tide. Number one, if you can beat them. I know that's a long shot, big time long shot. But if you go in there and fight and compete, that's a team that Vanderbilt fans, obviously, number one, if you're able to beat them, that's what Coach Mason was able to do. And for that 3-4 year period, Coach Mason, he had a lot of the fans, man. I mean, they were on him because he was beating Tennessee, right? He was beating Tennessee. And then, of course, it unraveled. But I think that's where it starts for most Vandy fans. If you go to Knoxville, compete, fight your butt off, I think that's something I think fans can look forward to potentially. We'll see how Tennessee does the rest of the season. But, it all starts with one win, and then you try to build off of that.
Gentlemen, let's do parting thoughts and get out of here. I'll start with Billy, then Luke, and then I'll end it.
Yeah, Chris, Missouri. Obviously, we'll have the pregame show coming out Friday. Should be a good one. Missouri is ranked now, and they're a team that Clark Lee obviously knows well. Last year, they got down 17-0, and Vanderbilt clawed back into the game, and they couldn't close it out. But it's the same situation as last week, right? They've got weapons. They've got a good, strong D-line. I mean, we're talking about the same stuff every week now, right? That's where we are in this season. And yeah, it's a bad thing after games, but it's not necessarily a bad thing before games, right? This hasn't changed, right? Play clean football and do what you can on defense. You'll give yourself a shot in the fourth quarter. Hasn't changed. Now it needs to change what we talk about after the games, right? Our post-game shows should be changing, Luke, right? Unfortunately, I won't be able to be there. What was that?
No more Andy Griffith reruns.
That was awesome. Somebody clipped it and posted it, but no, I mean, it hasn't changed. The tone needs to change how we talk about this team after games. But it hasn't changed before games. This team, they've got to take care of the football.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing to add to that. That's exactly what has to happen. And I said it before. That's what I said last week. And until we do that, we have no idea how good or how bad we are until that happens.
All right. As we've established, I've been doing this for 9 years, and we're getting to the point where it's kind of repetitive, and you're kind of out of stuff to say. But I'm going to give you a story from my personal life right now, and I'm going to use it as a jumping off point to illustrate some things. We are going through some stuff with my 9-year-old son right now. I mean, cannot get him to do basic things. Getting him out of bed every day is a chore. Love the kid with all my heart. Spent the weekend with him when I wasn't covering football. Had a great time with him. And then you think everything's great. And then, you wake up on Tuesday morning and I swear I could have run a marathon easier than I got him to the school bus stop. I mean, just basic things we've laid out expectations and compliance has been just about non-existent. Well, I hit a point yesterday where I'd had enough. And he comes home from school and he gets off the bus and like, buddy, you're grounded. We're not putting up with that anymore. And I'd let some stuff probably go too far with him. And boy, he did not like it. And boy, I heard about it. But you know what? Does it mean I hate my son? Of course not. You call out things as you see them that need to be fixed, and you do your best. You put 1 foot forward. You don't always know the answers, especially when you're in the middle of horrible times where just it all seems to be coming unglued. And yeah, I've done this a while. I'm sort of the critical guy around these parts, I guess. But the thing I always say is, hey, give me something to talk about that's better, and I will. Again, 9 years of the podcast, no winning seasons in football, no NCAA tournament wins in basketball. You're limited to what you cover. So I haven't said that. Yeah, I mean, I really have as much respect for Clark Lee and Barton Simmons and some of those guys over there as anybody I've ever covered. Really do like them. You kind of root for good people in this business, whether the ones you cover or they're elsewhere, because there aren't enough of them in sports. And I really like those guys. Wish them all the luck in the world. So the critical stuff I'm saying, it's not personal to anybody, but at the same time, when you look up every week and the same stuff starts popping up, fans are complaining about the same things. If you continue to do things the way that you're doing them, you're going to continue to get similar results. And so I'm interested to see if they can dig down and get something different, not just for this week, but for going forward. Again, we've outlined so many things that I think need to change for them to have their best shot to win. Look, if you're Vanderbilt and everybody's starting from the same place, you still got all this history and tradition to overcome that people are going to use against you in recruiting. So you cannot start out, if everybody start down here, Vanderbilt's starting out way below the screen. And I see things that continue to compound that are making it harder for them to win. I hope that they figure some of these things out on the field, off the field, whatever. But yeah, hopefully we'll see something change to where we're doing a different podcast at some point. But all that to say, it's not personal towards anybody or anything. I just see the same things we've been talking about for years, and for this to take a step forward, some stuff's going to need to change.
And Chris, maybe David and Vandy change at the same time. How crazy would that be? I mean, that maybe David starts changing a little bit, and all of a sudden Vanderbilt gets a win.
Well, I said some stuff that needed to be said last night, and at the end of it, I gave him a big hug before he went to bed, and we went to bed on the right foot. He got up this morning. It was a different morning. He got to the school bus. He gave me a hug, and we moved on. And I'm sure there's going to be a rough patch again, but you do your best. You point out things that need to change, and hope that people take care of that. And again, that's just kind of a good analogy with where I am with the football program. I don't want to see them fail. I don't. There's a lot of good guys over there, and I mean, God knows if they got rid of Clark Lee tomorrow, you could get another James Franklin. I know James won games, but just the respect that I have for him as a human being is low. And I think Luke would agree with me on that. You want to see good people do things, but you can't continue to do things the way they're doing and expect things to be different. So we'll see what we get going forward. I do think they can beat Missouri. Missouri has won its 3 FBS games by 13 points against Memphis.
Yeah, look at last week against Memphis.
Yeah, I mean it's there, but it cannot be the recipe we have seen and expect the result to be different. So I'll be interested to see what we get Saturday.
If Middle can cover, Vandy can. So I think we can expect at least a cover. No disrespect to Middle. I know you said they once used to have the same budget, Luke, but I think that's incredible. We need to have a podcast on that one day.
Boy.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, appreciate both of you. Appreciate our sponsors. Appreciate our audience. I think we've said it all today. We'll be back. Billy will have the pregame show, I guess, out Thursday or Friday. The postgame show, you will not be there for that, Billy. So we'll figure out how we're going to do that between Luke and Joey and I, and then I'll be back on the podcast. In addition to that one, hopefully I'll be back next week. So anyway, thanks to everybody for watching and listening. This has been the VandySports Podcast, and we'll see you again soon.